if you watched Black Panther, that movie for me was the vision that I had for Africa as a child. My controversial take is that not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur. You can be wealthy by building a strong, stable career. There are millions of examples of people like that. And entrepreneurship is exceptionally difficult. Hire good people, give them the best tools that you can, and get out of their way. If you're not resilient enough, you're going to give up very easily. You're going to walk away from challenging situations that are meant to grow you. You're unlikely to advance in your career or in your work if you're constantly broken down by the challenges that you're facing.
Solomon, how are you?
I am fantastic. How are you doing?
You're fantastic.
Yes.
I like that. My name is Ham Lubega. I work with StartHub, and what I want us to do this evening is to have a deep conversation. Maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, a deep conversation with Solomon. He's going to share a lot of his experiences. He's going to take us on a journey throughout his life, in what he has been able to achieve to date.
I hope it will be useful.
I'm thinking it will be useful. So let's start with, maybe you could just do a quick intro.
Yeah.
Just maybe name and a thing or two that you would like, and then we could start.
Cool. Good evening, good afternoon, good late afternoon, everyone. My name is Solomon King Benge. King is my middle name. I get that a lot. So it is my real name. I just prefer to go by Solomon King. I'm the founder and executive director of FundiBots. I have been in the tech space for a very, very long time, and now I've been in the education and tech space for the last 15 years. It's a delight to be here. I love to talk about failure and challenges, so feel free to ask the difficult questions when the time comes.
Nice. Benge. The name Benge, I think a lot of people miss out on what it is, so people know you as King.
Yes.
What do you prefer to be called?
When someone calls me Benge, I always think that I went to school with them. So because normally in school we call ourselves with our last names. Solomon is just fine. Yeah.
Solomon.
Yeah.
Solomon, if you could describe how you're feeling, if you describe yourself based on how you're feeling right now in 3 words, what would that be?
Grateful. I always practice eternal gratitude, no matter what I'm going through. Grateful, exhausted, extremely exhausted, constantly. I've been burnt out for about 10 years. And optimistic, because there's always hope.
10 years is a long time
It is a long time,
to be
yes,
burnt out.
yes.
Is that an indication of what people should look forward to if they're on this journey you've been on?
Yes, absolutely. Burnout is a constant for any founder, especially because of the weight that we carry. Because a lot of employee roles are very narrow, but founders is like this entire spectrum of responsibilities, problems, challenges, etc. And you're constantly in problem-solving mode, and we don't like to rest. And so we end up getting burnt out a lot. So I would say that it's possible, but you can manage it as long as you take care of yourself.
Yeah. And we'll circle back to that as well, because I think it's important to address some of those issues, especially with founders building really high impact startups and companies. Burnout is a serious issue on top of so many other mental issues as well.
Yes.
Let's go back to your childhood. When you were growing up, what was your biggest or wildest dream? Did you have that when you were growing up? Did you think that, for instance, you would have FundiBots?
Yeah.
Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So interestingly, FundiBots is a result of my childhood. The FundiBots dream, not in its current iteration, but my childhood, FundiBots is a reflection of the frustration that I had as a child. learning a lot of, being interested in many things about the world. So just for context, and every time I share this, I have to give a disclaimer that I am not trying to brag, but it's just the reality of what my childhood was. I grew up I like to say I grew up in the sugarcane plantations of Lugazi. So my dad used to work in Skol, and I grew up there. And I grew up in the 90s at a time when there was no internet, there were no computers available readily, and everything that you learned was in a library or a book. And I was a very high-performing child. Basically, I was those kids that would skip classes. I did P2 and P3 in 1 year. And so by the time I reached secondary school, I was much younger than most of my peers. But even as a child, I was building toy helicopters as how old was I in P3, P4? I was building toy helicopters in P4. The wired cars, those of you who are old enough to remember those wired cars we used to make, I was making those in 6, 7 years old. And they were electric, right? So I was basically connecting wires and batteries and things. And I built my first robot in P5. So I was one of those kids that was very curious about how the world worked, and I needed answers and solutions to some of the questions that I had. But it wasn't easy. And my vision for the future was a reflection of the things that I was seeing on TV. I loved cartoons, I loved science fiction. So I was excited by all these things that essentially showed a future that was full of potential. But unfortunately, the education system wasn't like that. And so FundiBots is a result of those frustrations. The challenge that I had in school are being addressed by FundiBots now, which is basically, what does quality science education look like for all students, but most importantly for those who are truly, truly passionate or even potentially gifted and could be outliers, but the education system is failing them. So how did I see my childhood? I loved science fiction shows, shows like Time Trucks, Bugs. I know that the audience here is very young, so I'm probably speaking Greek.
They're lost.
They're completely lost. But I would say that if you watched Black Panther, that movie, for me, was the vision that I had for Africa as a child, right? That sort of very culturally and locally contextual technology that's grown and built on the continent for the continent. So that's the kind of stuff that I was dreaming about, and I was doing a lot of crazy things in my primary school and secondary school.
Yeah. You mentioned that you read a lot of books. You
Yes.
did a lot of reading.
Yes.
Is there a particular book that you read, a particular book, a particular experience that was like the inflection point that made you think, maybe changed your experience in the way that you saw the world? And, when you were still that young?
Yes. Too many books. I used to spend most of my time in the library. I love to read. But there is a book that specifically led to the creation of FundiBots. It's a book that I discovered in my school library, one of those very dusty cabinets that's behind where the librarian doesn't even allow people to go, because why are you reading books in that section? It was a book called The Engineer in Wonderland, and it was a very dense book. It was very advanced material, and so I read it in, I think it was S2, and it tells a story. I don't know if you guys have read Alice in Wonderland, but it tells a story of electromagnetism through the perspective of Alice in Wonderland, basically a world of curiosity. And so I looked at the book, I looked at the experiments, everything looked so awesome, so cool. And I went to my physics teacher and I told him, can we do these things? It looks very exciting. And he mentioned that this is not important because it's not in the curriculum. And so that was the moment where I said, man, there has to be something better. I was young and naive, so my ambitions and dreams were a bit crazy, but that was the inflection point where I was like, yeah. And then on the flip side, and and this was just in response to the questions that you sent. There is a quote that I love that has always been at inflection points in my life, and it's by a lady called Anais Nin, and it basically says, and the day came when the risk to remain in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And for me, it's a reminder that you have to constantly exceed your places of comfort, because at some point that comfort becomes a risk. And so you have to find a way to explore the unknown at a certain point, because if you don't do that, then you risk getting stuck in comfort, in mediocrity, in fear, in uncertainty, etc. And so those two things have always been like a constant companion. One, a reminder that there are things that you are passionate about that other people may not see. And then there are comfort zones that you need to leave at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you, you've mentioned comfort zone, and I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
How do you typically tend to push yourself out of that comfort zone? Are there like certain frameworks you use? Is it a belief that you have?
Yeah. For me, I have always been extremely ambitious. I keep telling people that what FundiBots has achieved today is maybe 5% of what I actually wanted to achieve. And so for me, I'm always looking to find things that challenge me. I love challenges. I love just stepping out of boundaries. With some exceptions, there are some things that are comfort zones for me that I will not make exceptions for.
Tell us those exceptions. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that anyone who's trying to be an entrepreneur, who's trying to do something really big, you need to get extremely comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you're not going to move to any next level if you're not uncomfortable. Because the higher levels will challenge you, they'll stress you, they'll break you, they will do a lot of damage. But the healing, it's kind of like building muscle, right? You have to break down your muscle tissue so that it grows back stronger. And as long as you're not comfortable with that discomfort, with that pain, you're never going to achieve your goals. And so for me, I've always been, I guess I'm lucky that I have a mind that's always pushing boundaries. But I think that the idea of safety, especially for hopefully the audience in this room, is looking to explore some big ideas, but the idea of safety needs to disappear so that you can truly become who you're meant to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comfort is I think a big problem. Let's talk about FundiBots. You've done this for 10 years, over 10 years.
14 very long years.
14 very long years. We see most of the time in the ecosystem, people jump from one startup to another and don't fully explore each of those startups. Maybe you could just tell us what kept you at FundiBots. So first of all, I want to know, when did you know that this thing could work? Did you ever know that this thing could work, first of all? Or did you just go day by day saying, you know what, I just need to survive another day. Let me survive tomorrow and I'll see. And by accident, here you are. Of course, you put in some hard work. But what was that point when you had that eureka moment that FundiBots will work?
I think entrepreneurs are constantly deluded. We suffer from delulu, as the young people say. It is very hard for an entrepreneur to believe that something is not going to work. So it's the reverse. Like we are constantly saying, this thing has to work. I have to figure it out. And so I think maybe the time when it turned from something fun to something that I actually considered actively was, I think, 2012. 2013. So back then, FundiBots was still a hobby, and I was still working at my other companies that had started much earlier. But 2012, we got a grant from Google. I just randomly applied for a grant from Google. I think it was about 10,000 euros or $10,000. I don't remember the details. And when we got the grant, I was like, oh, this can actually work. Like maybe I'm onto something. And then we didn't get money for like another 3 years. And I was like, oh wait, this was a mistake. But yeah, that was around the time when I was like, okay, I think I can build that dream that I had as a child and see how to make it work. So the delusion is constant as startup founders, as entrepreneurs, as creators and innovators. We are always deluded by our ambition, by potential, etc. And I think that's the thing that drives us. The fact that you're able to believe in something that's not tangible, but something that you believe in so strongly that you want to exhaust every single option until it works. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. So you have to be Delulu.
Yes, I believe so. It's yeah.
Okay. Moments where you felt you were lost while building FundiBots. I'm sure there are many.
Yes.
Could you highlight maybe the most impactful, where you felt like I need to throw in the towel? This is madness. Could you tell us more about that?
Right now, my colleague from work is laughing because she knows. So right now, as you see me right now, I'm experiencing my biggest failure in my business history. Last year was a very difficult year for us at FundiBots. We've always been, not always, but we've been successful at raising money. We're a non-profit organization, so we've been successful at raising money since 2014. It's been difficult, but we've never had significant financial crisis. But then last year didn't go well, and the whole lot of factors, etc. And so it was really difficult. We had to unfortunately lay off some people. We had to revise our budget this year. And then Trump comes into power and suddenly everything just keeps going downhill. So I would say that, yes, I've had many, but right now it's one of the toughest. And the thing about being an entrepreneur, I have a friend who likes to say, never look like your problems. The thing about being an entrepreneur is that you have to present a face to your team, your founders, etc., to the public that says, you know what, I am in control. But the reality is that many entrepreneurs are probably going through an existential crisis every single day, something different. It could be maybe they're a farmer and the farm got burnt down. Maybe URA slapped you with a $500 million shilling tax. Maybe something happened at work and now there's a legal crisis. The average entrepreneur is going through a lot of things that you'll never realize until you sit down with them at a bar, and then like at midnight, they start talking about their issues. But the idea of resilience is core to thriving as an entrepreneur. And I keep saying entrepreneur, but I think some of these lessons are critical across every single facet of your work. Whether you are a junior staff member, senior staff member, if you're not resilient enough, you're going to give up very easily. You're going to walk away from challenging situations that are meant to grow you. You're unlikely to advance in your career or in your work if you constantly broken down by the challenges that you're facing. So even now, even as FundiBots is trying to navigate this specific crisis, getting worse every day, because just 2 weeks ago there was a rumor that Trump was going to do some stuff about non-profits and philanthropy in the US, and so I was on a call with my board chair. I was like, how are we going to navigate this? What's going to happen, etc. So there is a constant frustration that I'm going through right now because I'm not sure what my funders are going to do. Yes. But that doesn't stop us from moving forward with our mission. That doesn't stop us from coming to work every day and saying, let's see how this week holds up. Let's see how next month holds up. I'm sure many of you here know a lot of people have been laid off because of USAID, drama, etc. It's real, it's challenging. If you're in the nonprofit space, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But the people that we serve, we work with children. We work with about 50,000 children every single year. The people that we serve are so important to our mission that we will keep pushing until the very last minute. So yeah, that's the context. It's difficult, but we have to keep going forward.
I like the conviction with which you say your mission.
Yeah.
You're convicted to your mission.
Yes.
Again, I just want to dig a bit deeper because, like you mentioned, a number of founders are going through an existential crisis even as we speak.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are at that point, that breaking point, where they are going to go and start a different business. Where I told you that every 1 or 2 years they jump and start.
Jump something new, yeah.
Is there a moment when you have felt like this? So first of all, I know this year has been very difficult because of the Trump administration and the reforms that they've had. It may be difficult to see that there's anything worse than this, but is there a point in time where you felt that FundiBots was in trouble, and how do you wake up every day? Like, what do you do? How do you motivate the team? And I know you have a staff of about 100.
120.
120.
Yeah,
that's a big team.
It is, and we had to cut it down, so it was 150 something last year. Yeah.
How do you wake up every day and tell 120 people that they may be out of a job tomorrow?
Some of them are in this room. All right. So one, I like to be very transparent as I can legally be. There are some things, just to qualify that statement, there are some things as an executive director or a founder or a CEO that have to be discussed at the board level. So there's a limit to some transparency. But I like to be as transparent as possible. And so I am constantly engaging my team and basically telling them that this is what's happening, this is what we are going through. As far back as September, November last year, we're basically trying to figure out all the challenges. I was updating the team. This is what we're going through. This is what we're trying to figure out, etc. I like to lead from a point of honesty and empathy, and that means that no matter what happens, we're in this together. Changes might happen, but at the end of the day, 2 questions for you. Do you believe in the work that we are doing, and are you committed enough to do that work? And as long as we are aligned on both of those, then I know that I have a partner in this journey, and that partner can range from the person who helps us clean the office to our head of finance and operations. For me, every single one of those roles is equally important, because without one or the other, the organization can come to a halt. So I also like to lead by example. We're in the trenches together. Let's get through this together. If we are going through a crisis, we're going through it through all of it together. If we are doing salary cuts, we are all going through the same thing together. If there is a challenge and it's something that I can share with you from the board, I will share it with you. So I don't like to keep people in the dark for as much as I can. But also, I really, really love to build organizations where people are invested in the mission of the organization. And once you have that, then you'll have difficult times, but you'll know that at the very least, the people that you're working with are mission aligned.
And transparency essentially gets you buy-in also from the team.
Yes.
To be able to follow you along the journey. And
it's very risky. Obviously, there are some people who will hear the truth and they'll start writing CVs and doing job applications, and that's fine. But for me, I would rather be honest and transparent, and then have people make the choices they need to make, than have things and then hide things and then surprise people, because all of us are here for a reason. There's a quote that I like: we're all trying to make it home. And so it doesn't make sense for you to blindside someone because these are people who have lives, they have families, they have dependents, etc. And so the best you can do is prepare them in advance in case anything comes. So I'd
Yeah.
rather have that sort of early stage concern than late stage panic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since we're still on the subject of teams and building teams,
Yeah.
you have built a team to about 150 before the layoff. What strategies do you typically tend to use when you're building teams? How do you identify good talent? Because I think this is one of the biggest problems, and we were having a chat earlier on talking about teams. How do you build a really solid team? You are heavily engaged in fundraising, so a lot of the times you're also not around. But the organization continues to grow. This is something that founders typically tend to deal with. How do you go around building a good team?
That's a very critical part of building organizations. So when the second darkest time of my business career was 2017. Between 2005, some people were in kindergarten.
People calculating your age.
I know they're calculating my age. Between 2005 and 2017, I built 2 companies in multimedia, visual effects, web design, and all those things. And it was very hard because I was new, I didn't know what I was doing. We constantly had cash issues. It was really difficult. We're doing fantastic work, some of the best work in the country, but the financial management just wasn't there. Actually, it was mostly sales inflows. There was no strong sales funnel to sustain the team. So in 2017, I had to make a critical decision because at that point I was running 3 companies. I was running FundiBots, Node 6, which was the website application development company, and then Elemental Age, which was multimedia, VFX, TV advertising, film, etc. And I reached a point where I was like, I need to focus on one thing, otherwise everything is going to fail. And the reason for failure is going to be the answer to the question that you've just asked. So what I decided to do was to close the other 2 companies because I was heavily in debt with them. I owed my staff a lot of money. It took me a few years to pay off that debt. But then also there was this really promising project that I'd been excited about ever since I was a kid, and I was like, you know what, I need to give this baby a chance to live. So the big reason why I believe these things failed was that problem with hiring people and building a culture away from the founder. There's something called founder syndrome, where founders don't like to give up control. They think that every single decision should pass by their desk. And the problem with that, which is a problem my other 2 companies faced, was that as long as there was any problem, it always came to Solomon. Whether it was a client who had issues, whether it was an employee who had issues, I had no buffer because no one trusted that things could get done unless I was in the picture. So I learned that lesson, very, very painful lesson. And so since 2017, I've been building FundiBots to not be that. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, especially because in 2017, I think we were like 5 people in FundiBots. And so growing from 5 to 150 last year took a lot of work. But the main component of that work was, how do I build an organization that can outlive me? And the important part about that is you have to hire people that are professional, people that are committed to the work that they're doing, and people who can deliver. And then start building structures. And that's a whole other lecture on its own. Yeah. You start building structures. You start doing difficult things that your staff members are going to hate you for. Yeah? Because the minute you start putting HR policies, trust me, some people are going to leave the organization. Some people are going to get angry that why am I now reporting to a new supervisor instead of reporting directly to you? You're asking for accountability in finance and people are not happy. They're like, no, things are changing. What's all this? But you have to be relentless because unless you want to be the only person on that seat, and we're in a country where you know what that means, that seat can be sweet. Unless you want to be the only person in that chair, you have to build systems that allow you and allow the team to thrive. And I think the disadvantage with founder syndrome is that your team never really gets the autonomy and authority to truly excel, because they're always living under your shadow, right? And so I'm not sure if I've done it well enough, but I like to think, because right now I believe that FundiBots can run an entire year without me. Of course, there's some logistics, like, you know, who signs the bank checks, etc. But the systems that are in place are strong enough for it to run. Of course, I still need to fundraise, but thankfully we have someone who's becoming a rock star fundraiser. But the point is, as long as you're consistent, and it's many, many years of consistency. It's almost decades of consistency if you're trying to build something really big. You have to nurture people, hire the right people, train them, retain them. You'll make a lot of mistakes with people you should have let go earlier, people who've stayed on too long, people who believe that the organization is changing and that's not a good thing. And the weight that founders bear is that you see something in the future that no one else sees, and you have to find a way to translate that into day to day, because even the person who's cleaning the office needs to be aligned to that thing that you're seeing. And if they are not, then there's going to be chaos in that department, right? So it takes a lot of very deep, very intentional work, very difficult work, and you'll never get it right. I want to assure you that you're going to make so many mistakes in your career or in your founder journey. But the most important thing is, are you learning and are you adapting quickly enough to not make that mistake again? Because the next mistake is going to be bigger, right? One day you're struggling to make payroll for 5 people, another day you're struggling to make payroll for 100 people, right? It just keeps getting bigger. And your hope is that you reach a point where you're able to deal with the big problems without any significant system shocks. And that's where the policies come in, the structures, the systems, all these things that are boring and many startup founders don't like to do because it's not exciting. But if you want to build something that lasts, you definitely have to put in the work.
Do you think, and I'll put you on the spot here for a bit, because you have grown from a team of 5,
a team of 1,
a team of 1 for like 7 years.
Yeah.
So from a team of 5 in 2017, it's now 2025. That's about 8 years.
Is it 8?
More or less.
Yeah.
And you've grown to about 150 or so. Do you think that the way you grew, the way you scaled the business, do you have any regrets as to how you scaled? Do you think it's at this point in time giving you, for instance, the stress that you're going through? Could it be a result of maybe how quickly you grew?
In hindsight, yes. Would I change it? Would I change the growth? Probably not, but I would change certain things about processes, right? The growth was necessary. The growth of FundiBots was driven by, okay, so just for context, for those of you who don't know FundiBots, FundiBots works with young people, kids in primary school, secondary school, and university. Our mission is to accelerate science learning in Africa. And so the first model that we started with was robotics. We still teach kids how to make robots, and the goal was that, and I know that there's a question about this later, so I'll just skim through for now. So robotics was a primary learning tool, but then we realized it wasn't impactful enough for the problem we're trying to address, which is the quality of African education, but more importantly, the quality of people who live the African education system. So we decided to develop a new model which integrates directly into the national curriculum. And so that model is being implemented in 51 schools with about 24,000 students. So most of our growth happened because of that model, because it was large. We had to build a manufacturing facility. So we make learning tools, we train teachers, our staff goes to school to support teachers, etc. And because of how we had designed the growth of the program, every year was an increment on the previous year. So every year we would add new classes and would add new schools, right? And so because of that, we had no choice but to keep growing, right? So the growth, the only growth that I regret is much earlier with my media company. That one was not a good idea. This one was part of the strategy. What I would probably change would be how we manage some of the resources and how efficient we were at delivering some of the programs. But would I regret the growth? No.
Okay, because those are lessons anyway that you still have to go through. It's hard to predict a lot of things, especially when you're growing.
Yeah.
And some things also happen to be luck.
Yeah. Although I would say that if you think about growth, your question is very pertinent, right? You have to be extremely intentional about growth. And the one advice that I give to people is don't grow until you're uncomfortable. Because most of us like to grow in anticipation of new business. And that was a mistake that I made. You're like, okay, I think this year we're going to reach 500 new clients. So I need to hire a marketing person. I need to hire 2 graphics designers. I need to do this. But you're hiring and growing without the actual money to build. So my advice is always stay as small as possible until it is so uncomfortable. There are like 5 of you squeezed around a small table and you're like, guys, we need to do something about this. And that's when you know that, okay, now it's time to move to the next level. And then for that level as well, you stay as uncomfortable as possible until it's time for the next level, because that maximizes your profit margins and allows you to actually plan for proper growth.
Yeah. I think when you're speaking about growth, I remember something that either I read from you or from someone else, and it was about how do you balance, because you have investors, you have a board, you heavily track impact and numbers. How do you prevent yourself from being too obsessed with the numbers over the human, right? Since we're talking about growth, I would like to just cover that, and then we can move on to the next.
I think there are different perspectives, and yes, I wrote this a few weeks ago, and the context for this is in the fundraising space. In the nonprofit space, there's something called impact, and impact is basically how effective is your work in making the change that you have promised. So if you go to a donor for money, they'll be like, okay, tell us about your impact. And then you'll be like, oh, last year we changed education outcomes for 24,000 students, for 50,000 students, and half of them performed better than if they didn't have the aim. So that kind of conversation. The problem with that is that it's very easy to get obsessed with numbers. So in the for-profit space, it's similar but not as intense, because in the for-profit space you're providing a service and there is a perceived value to that service, right? So if you're selling computers, it's an exchange. You give me money, I give you this thing, and we're both happy and we walk away. In the non-profit space, someone else is giving you money and you're doing this thing and the beneficiary is happy, but there's a sort of uneven dynamic. So the big challenge around the nonprofit space is that the people that you're trying to help end up becoming statistics. They end up becoming numbers on a dashboard, right? You're like, oh, we need to optimize this, etc. And you're moving things, you're doing Excel tables, but these are actual real people that you're moving from one column to another, right? And so the reason I wrote that post was we need to constantly remember that whatever we are doing, we are dealing with people who have actual human lives, who have families, who have dignity, who have agency, and we need to treat them with the respect that deserves. It doesn't matter whether they have AIDS or whether they are prostitutes or whatever it is, whatever stigma or bias that you have that affects you from looking at them objectively, it doesn't matter. What matters is that they are people and they are deserving of every little sense of dignity. And so that was the context for that post.
Okay, that's very good. it's important to consider that
Yeah.
all the work that we do is for actual people,
Actual people,
and not
yes.
to forget that.
Yes.
I think we tend to forget that as
Yeah.
we're in the hustle. Solomon, why STEM? Why do you think STEM is the thing that's going to transform Africa? The president keeps singing about his scientists. Are you one of his scientists? And why are you singing this song?
When you say am I one of his scientists, you make me think of the Bazukulu statement, which annoys many of us these days. I am a scientist. I'm a Ugandan scientist. I don't know if I'm one of his scientists, but I am a Ugandan scientist. We shall stay away from politics. So STEM. So just to come back to that, one of the issues that I have when people talk about around education discourse, right, is that people look at sciences and arts as though they are mutually exclusive, as though each exists in isolation. Humanity is a combination of these two things. And we see that a lot, and I know we're going to talk about AI at some point. We see that a lot in how AI works, right? As long as you have brilliant people who have no context for humanity, no context for society, you're always going to end up with machines and devices that are extremely defective. You need people who look at the humanity in the world and bake that into solutions, right? So just for that discourse, I don't believe that we should attach a higher importance to arts or sciences. I believe that both are equally important for the advancement of humanity as a whole. The reason why I obsess over sciences, over STEM specifically, is because one, there is a wave of technology that is sweeping across the world, and Africa is being left behind every day exponentially, right? And by that I mean the education system that we have today is not catering for the jobs of today, and it's not catering for the jobs of tomorrow. So the kids that are coming out of school right now are not ready for the workplace that exists today. And you see this when you speak to employers. There are very little soft skills, there are very little technical skills, there's very little intrinsic knowledge around subject matter. And so a lot of employers spend so much time training, retraining, paying for courses just so that the students graduating from university can actually be qualified for entry-level work, right? And I'm talking about entry-level work. Once you leave school, the first job that you do, many of our students are not prepared for that. Now, the challenge with that is the acceleration that happens in the world of science and technology is very difficult to keep up with if you're not creating the right workforce for it. And by workforce, I'm talking about employees, employers, innovators, visionaries, etc. Everyone that is looking at some sort of innovation is what I would categorize as workforce. So if your education system is not catering for the jobs that are available today, if you look at the vocational institutions that we have, many of them are still teaching courses that were relevant in the 1980s and the 1990s. You look at a course like carpentry, it's relevant now, but there's so much that has changed from a hand saw that was the common tool in the 80s and 90s to electronic tools, routers, tables, etc. And so you find that the people that are coming out of the education system or the vocational institutions still are not ready for what's coming. They can't use AI tools. They can't use automated tools. They have to be retrained and retaught. All of this stuff needs to happen in the classroom while students are still in the school system. So my obsession with science and engineering and STEM and all those things is I'm looking at a future of Africa that is going to be devastating if we are not ready for it. We are already the world's biggest labor force, and if we are not careful, we are going to remain a labor force as opposed to innovators and creators and tinkerers. But as we like to say, it would be nice to send the first African on the moon as well. So let's hope we get there.
We'll talk about AI. I think it's a subject that you're deeply also passionate about.
Yes.
You mentioned that the workforce is not ready, employers are not ready. how do you and FundiBots, how does FundiBots stay relevant in the current dynamics? So the world is changing super quickly. New things are coming up every so often. You still have a curriculum. I think the new curriculum has been heavily untested, and there's a lot of retraining that needs to be done to even the teachers to be able to do that curriculum. I think what I'm trying to say is, what I'm trying to ask is, how do you navigate these rough waters? You're dealing in an environment that is slow, and yet you're moving fast.
Yeah.
How do you get them to catch up, or how do you stay with them and still progress ahead?
Yeah.
How do you stay relevant as well?
Education reform is difficult. Every decision that a government or a ministry makes about education is going to affect millions of children and millions of parents. So I can understand why it takes long. It's not just in Uganda. A lot of countries take many years to reform the education systems because it is a process. As you've seen, we did ours, and there's a lot of chaos. Results came out recently. I think there were O-level results, and everyone was so confused that what do you mean now kids are getting A's and B's in O-level, because we've been used to a certain system. So education reform is difficult. So for any government, however inefficient they are, I acknowledge that difficulty, right? However, you need to also be extremely proactive in that reform. So do not reform from 20 years in the past to 10 years in the past. You need to reform from 20 years in the past to 5 years or 10 years in the future, right? That's what true reform could look like. So how we stay ahead of the curve, again, because of that, it's very difficult for us to run too far ahead, because that means that if we are trying to do anything at the systems level, it means that we are not going to be able to do the right thing effectively, because now we are running too far ahead of schools, and schools won't be able to adopt the work that we are doing. So what we do is create a sort of middle ground where we provide support that exists within the current school systems, and then support that looks towards the future. So the robotics work for us was, I mean, we started teaching robotics at the time when many African countries are not talking about AI or robotics, but now it's a big deal, and we're happy that a few of our students are doing it. But you have to constantly keep thinking ahead. And the thing that's helpful for us is we are a team of teachers, education technologists, and hardcore technologists. So we are constantly interfacing we are constantly interacting at the at the intersection of what's possible today, what can we do today, and what can we do for tomorrow. So it's always chaotic, but it's a kind of chaos that I love, because it means that we are constantly pushing boundaries. So we're always experimenting, always testing new things. Not everyone likes it. It gets a bit crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
But that's the only way that you can stay,
relevant,
on the cutting edge. Yeah.
Okay, staying on the cutting edge, and again staying relevant and adapting to the way the world is changing. The biggest, I think, conversation in the room is now AI. It used to be crypto at one point in time. Before that, it was Y2K. For those who remember.
Yeah.
The biggest conversation in the room is AI, and how that is disrupting the way people work, and the way people study, the way people do healthcare.
Yeah.
And there have been so many fears around loss of employment, and yet there's also a flip side to that coin, where people think productivity is going to go up, and perhaps in some places we have seen it go up. I'd just like to maybe get your opinion and your thoughts on how you see AI. One, how it's going to shift the landscape in terms of FundiBots and the way FundiBots works. For instance, are you going to have AI-powered robots going forward, and how do you protect, for instance, kids around AI-powered robots?
Yeah.
How do you deal with privacy-related issues around AI? how do you deal with the lack of policy and really good policy within organizations on how to use AI.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation on AI and just like to tease out a couple of thoughts from you.
Yeah, so AI is a complex topic. That could be, again, it could be another session on its own. I am a technology maximalist, which basically means that I believe that technology is a tool that, if used well, could advance humanity. And so I will always have my discussions from that point. I am not unaware of the challenges that technology brings. And so I like to say that technology is a tool, AI is a tool. The thing with tools is that they can be so efficient that they eliminate the need for actual humans in a certain role. But they can also be so efficient that they help other humans amplify potential. And then on the flip side, they can be extremely dangerous. All right. A good example is nuclear energy. Nuclear energy, if Uganda had one nuclear reactor, it would probably provide all the energy the country needs. But the dangers around it need to be insists that we take it very seriously. So I like to think about AI as one of those technological existential threats that we need to pay close attention to. I like to argue from both sides of the coin. So on the flip side, anyone who's using AI in their work is amplifying their potential tremendously if you're using it well. If you're using ChatGPT in your work to do your research, etc., it amplifies it. I personally use it a lot. I use it especially as a thought partner. One of the problems that I have is there's too much chaos in my head, and sometimes it's hard to translate it for the people that I work with. And so sometimes I ask AI, how do I provide clarity around this? What am I missing? What are my blind spots? How do I improve this message, etc.? And it's a really, really powerful tool that can shorten a lot of complexities. AI also has tremendous benefit: healthcare, disease detection. It's being used in agriculture to detect infections in crops using drones. So you can fly over your field of maize and the drone will take a photo and you'll be able to determine that there's a maize plant that's sick and you uproot it before it actually infects the rest of the plants. So there are so many solutions like that. Actually, one of our FundiBots students who's in university now is trying to build a malaria detection tool using artificial intelligence. And so there's a lot of pros. It has the potential to exponentially amplify the potential for both individuals and communities. It has a lot of potential for creativity. Of course, there are ethical issues around that as well, like what was the data trained on, etc. But if you look at one side of the coin, AI is going to be as transformative for the world as the internet was when it was started. That is my firm belief. The flip side is that AI is also going to be devastating in certain places. Back when, and you and I were talking about AI back in the day, we've been following AI progress since the early 2000s. And so back then, the fear was that AI would take over the more technical work. So things like operating machines, the menial work that is repetitive, etc. And now the challenge is that the flip side has happened. AI is not only doing that stuff, but AI is actually now creative. It's able to think, it's able to rationalize. Debatable about the phrases, but yeah, it gives the appearance of being able to think, which means that it can be extremely useful. The problem with that is that now we have people whose jobs are at risk. And now it's a spectrum. At first, the assumption was that it's going to be the low-income earners, the guys who do manual labor, etc., who do packaging, moving one thing to another, where the robots and AI will just replace them. But now the existential threat is across the board. I have experimented with a couple of AI tools where you can basically give the AI the role of the executive director of a company, and it will actually run a company as long as no one knows that they're speaking to a machine, right? And that's how powerful it's become. So the spectrum has widened and everyone's job is at risk. The people who are going to excel are people who use AI as a rocket boost. basically the people who are using these tools to amplify their work, to get better, to learn faster. How FundiBots is planning to use this, one of the things that I've been playing around with is the idea of personal tutors. Basically, if you have, every child can basically get their own teacher that understands their level of knowledge, their limitations, and is able to adapt to that child's education level. So that means that you can be in a large class of this size and everyone is getting highly personalized learning at the same time, because this one AI is able to, talk to all of us individually. The danger with that is what happens to teachers, right? What happens to teachers? What happens to tutors? Do students get addicted to this machine because it's paying attention to them exclusively as if they're the only person in the world that matters? And we are seeing issues with people falling in love with these AI things, killing themselves because the AI has told them that they should go kill themselves. So it's really complex. The flip side to that as well is there's something in AI called hallucination, which basically means, and I'm sure you've seen it, this machine will just make up facts and it will call them facts, and you will share those facts with your boss, and your boss will be like, where did you get these things? Or you will treat those facts as if they are real facts and proceed, not knowing that you've been fed wrong information. So that is very dangerous for education, because the assumption is that the person or the thing that is teaching you knows what it's doing. So if your AI is making up random equations or making up random details about science facts, then that's not a good teacher. The challenge, which is something that I'm constantly struggling with, there was a report from the World Bank that came out, and this is going to be a very shady statement, but bear with me. And please don't quote me and retweet me and I get cancelled. There's a report that came out in 2018, I think. It was a World Bank report. And it basically said, I think it was a report about the quality of education in Africa. And there was a country, and it was a reflection of many African countries. There was a country where the primary 4 or primary 5 teacher could not perform better than their best student in that class. Let me say that again. The teacher that is teaching that class can be beaten by the best student in that class. Now that should never happen. A teacher is supposed to be a point of knowledge, a point of superiority, right? So if I'm giving a math exam, and I think it happened recently where was it an RDC or district something, told all of his teachers to do an exam and most of them failed, right? It happened, I think it was last year, all right? So we have an education problem in that the teachers, many of the teachers are actually not very qualified to teach what they're teaching. And so the shady statement that I have is, do you trust an AI that hallucinates 95% of the time? Or do you trust a teacher that knows 70% of the content? What is the less of the two evils?
Perhaps I'll go with AI.
So yeah.
It's interesting. Hallucinations are a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think also, I'd like you to also speak about just around policy. I think a lot of employers are hiding, putting their heads in the sand, thinking that their employees are not using AI. Do you think it's right for them to perhaps come up with policies around the use of AI? Is it too early to even consider it? Or do you think that they should just go ahead of the curve and put in place policies that allow employees to actually use AI in a more responsible way, and not give proprietary data to systems when they don't even know?
I think it's too late. It's not too early. It's too late. We don't have a policy ourselves. I know that I'm sure 90% of my team is using AI. I would actually encourage them to use AI as long as they fact check everything, and as long as they are using it as an assistant, not as a source or an authority, right? The best way to use AI is if you already know the thing and you need clarity. But if you don't know the thing, you won't know whether it's telling you the right thing or not. That's where the danger is. So I encourage people to use AI as much as they can. Organizations need to have policies, which you've actually put me in a moment of panic because I was like, we should have done this like last year. Organizations need to have policies, especially around data protection. This is not a perfect hack, but if you want to use AI with any sensitive information, then go into a temporary chat mode where you can feed it some documents, but I highly, highly discourage feeding sensitive information to any AI system, because one day you're going to wake up and that information is being recovered from a database somewhere and someone else is using it. So if something is sensitive, do not feed it into an AI, use it as a thought partner, a thinking partner. You can use it to refine your documents. I know that many of us struggle with grammar and English and spelling and all those things. So if you need a spell check, use it. But the problem is, if you are not building yourself as well, you will still have that problem. Meaning that the day that you are away from your computer, your true colors will shine. All right? And that's where the danger is. Yeah.
Okay. It's important. I think policies are very important to put in place.
Yeah, but also speaking of policies, one of the things that we need to do for AI on a national and global level is to put policies around data privacy, around information bias, because in the very early days of machine learning and artificial intelligence, there was, and I love to give this example, there's a time when I think it was HP or Dell released laptops that would recognize your face and then unlock your PC. So those laptops would not recognize any single African face.
Yeah.
Because they were trained on white faces. And then you end up with all these things where and this is where the arts versus humanities thing comes in, because as technical people, we like data, we like facts, we like structure, but we don't have nuance, we don't have context. So you find AIs that are extremely racist because that's the data that they've been given. You'll find AI that's extremely misogynistic because it's been trained on that kind of data. So we do need to have policies around safe AI safety, around digital citizenship. And I know that a lot of parents are now turning to ChatGPT for their kids and other AI tools. Some of those tools are extremely dangerous. They will literally encourage your child to go jump off a building. So you need to be very careful as a parent if you're working with your child, if you're letting your child use an AI, especially those chatbots that are designed to be a companion, a friend, etc. They're very dangerous. So yeah, we definitely need a lot of controls around that.
I think also maybe to make it more practical, because you've said that there are positive use cases for AI. Yeah. It has its advantages as much as there are also a number of disadvantages. The question would be how, maybe just 3 pointers. So the first one you mentioned, you can use AI as a thought partner, for instance, for also if you don't have a team yet that you built that you can rely on, or you're just a very quiet person who doesn't want to speak to other people, you can use it as a thought partner. What 2 other ways can a founder effectively use AI in the current context that we have, especially in Uganda? A lot of the data it has been trained on is not very contextual. Yeah. That's the first thing. How do you go around effectively using it for a founder here? Maybe just as a segue also, I think I was watching an interview from Nadal, the CEO of Microsoft, and he mentioned that 30% of their code base is now AI generated. Do you see a use like that in Africa?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you guys know of something called vibe coding. It's a new thing for the techie people. Essentially, you can build applications just by telling the AI what you want. So it means that you don't have to know how to program, you don't have to know code. The problem again, if you don't know what you're doing, you will not know what's wrong. And so you'll find there are people who've uploaded things to Play Store and they've been hacked because the AI included their passwords inside, and because you don't know what you're doing, you don't know that that's a password that's been put in there. So, but you can use AI for a lot of very early stage prototyping tools, especially those who are looking into application development. It's a good way to get the ideas out of your mind into something that you can see, and then hopefully you give it to a professional to actually build it. The other thing that I like to do, which is a sort of personal approach towards learning and knowledge, when people make decisions or when people are trying to understand scenarios, most of us stop at the first level. So basically you say, if I walk out of this room right now in the rain, the first level is I'm going to get wet, right? But what are the second and third order consequences of you stepping out into that rain? You're going to get wet, you're going to need to find somewhere to get dry from, you're going to miss a few appointments, la 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 la. Like there's outcomes of outcomes. So the thing that I like to use with AI is I constantly ask it, what are the second order outcomes and third order outcomes? Because that opens your eyes into some really long-term challenges that you might not have seen. And it's actually a good way of reverse engineering an idea, because you're like, okay, I want to build an app for farmers. And then, you brainstorm with it, and then you ask it, what are the second or third order consequences of creating a function that allows farmers to buy directly to sell directly on the site. And then it tell you things like, oh, there's potential for fraud, there's potential for quality control, etc. And these are things that we don't think about because your first thought is, I want to build an app for farmers. So try that. Ask your AI when you're discussing something, ask it what are second and third order consequences. Ask it, what are my blind spots? What am I missing? How can I improve my thinking? And the thing I love about that is that you will genuinely begin improving your thinking, because now you're thinking at a different level. You're like, okay, if I do this, this happens, that happens, etc. And then you're able to figure out how to resolve those issues.
Yeah, that's very useful. I think I do that a lot as well, and
Yeah.
I've found that initially it's a bit difficult, but as you keep doing it, then you really start to understand our thought process and how you design your own thought process.
Yeah.
We could go on and on with AI forever. Let's go back to FundiBots for a minute.
Yeah.
You have a huge goal: 1 million children by 2030.
Yes.
You have 5 years. No pressure.
Trust me, I know every second it's on my mind. Yes.
How do you set these crazy goals?
Again, delusion. Many of us are ambitious beyond our current capabilities, but I think that's what aspiration is. But these numbers didn't come out of air. We actually sat down. So we actually wrote that strategy in 2020 during the height of COVID, when we were all at home for the first time in our lives, working from home. I sat down with my team, sat down to reflect, and basically charted from 2020 to 2030. So at that time, there was a proper path towards it. The unfortunate thing is that COVID happened in between, and so schools in Uganda were closed for 2 years, and so 2021, 22, we had to recalibrate. So we are not quite on target, but we hope to get there. So the way that we hope to achieve those goals is through tech.
Yeah.
Right. So we have that government embedded program where we work directly with schools and teachers. So that alone, if we reach 1,000 schools, that's easily 1 million kids.
Yeah.
Right. If you assume 1,000 kids in a school, that's easily 1 million kids. And we are targeting Africa, so it's technically feasible. The reality, of course, is completely different. But we also want to put things online. And so we want to open up an online platform that allows any child or any teacher from Africa to go online and learn some of the things that we are providing. And the good thing is that once you put things online, your growth is exponential if it's a right product market fit. So people are able to use your tool accordingly. But how you go about setting those goals, I like to break things down in chunks. Basically, everything can be theoretically achieved once you break down the steps. and start working towards those steps. So you look back and you look ahead and you're like, okay, 1 million kids, what does that look like? How many countries? You can be in 5 countries, and so you're like, okay, I need 200,000 in each country. What would it take to reach the 200,000 in each country? That's about 500 schools in each country, blah, blah, blah. So you break it down like that, and then you realize that, yes, it's a lot of work, but it's possible. So I like the idea of breaking things down into chunks. And then the other thing is that you absolutely need to get rid of founder syndrome. You're not going to be able to hit large milestones if you're the only voice of authority, right? You need to hire good people and give them the permission to execute and execute in your absence. There's a founder that one of those multi-billion-dollar organizations, one of their founders that I was listening to on a podcast. He basically says that he gives a certain percentage of error, because as long as he trusts that the person is doing their best and with the best intentions, then the mistake that they made or the mistake that they make is not a problem unless there are too many mistakes. So essentially, if you give me, let's say you hire me and you're like, okay, I need you to run the hardware section of StartHub, right? I'm going to mess up in many places. But as long as you trust and believe that I am doing the best that I can and my intentions are good, you give me a certain grace, a certain amount of room to grow, adjust, adapt, etc. And I think for him it was like 70-30, meaning that he allows up to 30% of mistakes. And anything beyond that, then it's just incompetence, right? So I like that theory. I also like the idea of hiring good people and giving them room to work. It's a bit of a difficult thing because if you don't have the money, it's hard to hire good people. So you need to train people from zero, which means that you need to be even more graceful with people making mistakes. But if you have the money and you hire good people, then that mistake allowance becomes smaller. So I like to build teams that can execute efficiently. One thing that I struggle with is providing clarity, but you need to provide clarity. I struggle with providing clarity because my head is always running at 1,000 miles a second, and so I'll jump from one thing to another. And many times I need to backtrack and say, just to be clear, this is what I'm saying, this is what the intention is. So providing clarity for people is really important because it allows those big goals to be broken down and executed efficiently by the people that you trust. And then I think this was from 7 Habits. I used to read a lot of self-help books when I was much younger in my career. So 7 Habits start with the end in mind. Basically means how do you quantify the end result of what you're trying to achieve, and then work backwards to achieve that journey. Sorry, to and of course with entrepreneurs there are a lot of zigzags. It's never a straight path. But as long as there's something called the North Star, which is something that I love. As long as there is a direction that you know you're supposed to be headed in. So even if you go this way, you look and you're like, okay, my North Star is there. How do I get back on track? You go this way, you're like, my North Star is there. How do I get back on track? So all the zigzags eventually even out into the North Star.
Super cool. How are you guys feeling? Huh? Are you still alive? Too much information?
Too little information?
Do you need more? Okay, let's allow for 2 questions.
Yes.
Can we allow for 2 questions from what we've spoken about, what we've covered so far, Solomon's journey? Okay. We'll start with. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Nelson Andres Benge. I'm a founder and CEO of a company called StartHub Commodities Exchange Limited. I do energy, coffee, oil business, and car business. So just wanted to ask, we talked about fundraising. So what are some of the tips that you might give to someone who are in business? What are some of the tips that you have been using to consistently raise funds from donors or other development partners? Thank you.
So I'll speak mostly from the non-profit space because that's my biggest fundraising experience. The first piece of advice that when I started my fundraising journey, when I started my non-profit, I didn't like to fundraise. I am extremely introverted. Thankfully, I've become better at it, but I'm not very good with, well, I never used to be very good with like public engagements, etc. And so what I kept trying to do was to hire someone to do that work. So to write grant applications, to do all those things. But then one of my advisors basically said that for the size of your organization, the best person to do the fundraising is you. So for many of us who struggle with interactions, meeting people, asking for money, all those things, unfortunately, you have to figure out how to do it in a way that makes sense for you. You apply your skills to the mission, the purpose that you are trying to achieve. So first and foremost, if you're a small organization, you need to be the one going out there looking for the money. Actually, the same happens for sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Because one of the mistakes that I made in my other organization as well was I kept hiring people and they would struggle to articulate the work that we do as an organization. And so it was important that you, the person who understands the work, you're at the forefront, you're the one looking for the sales, the business, the money, etc. That would be my first tip. My second tip is a lot of investors, funders, donors, etc. invest in organizations that show that they know what they're doing, which means that if they come to you and you have disorganized books of finance, books of accounts, sorry, they will not invest in you. If your policies look like there's a problem in there, of course it depends on the size of the organization, but essentially you need to be ready so that when they come, they find that you actually have all the things that you need, that you need. And I think that's one of the things that StartHub helps with. Basically, you need to be investor ready, otherwise you're just wasting time. Then the third is they'll pay a lot of attention to how you're managing your cash. A lot of us are not very good at managing cash, especially in the early days before we have an accountant. We're always running around and we don't account for anything. And so someone will come and look at your books and say, you know what, you're not serious, come back to us when you're more serious. So that's the technical stuff. The other non-technical stuff is if you're looking for grants, fundraising is difficult. It takes time, so you need to be patient. You're not going to meet someone and they give you money immediately. I think the shortest that the shortest we've gone from hi, my name is Solomon, I'm the executive director of FundiBots, to someone sending us money has been 6 months, but on average it takes about 2 years. So don't make the assumption that you're going to go to a conference or a networking event, meet someone and they'll give you money immediately. So temper your expectations, continue to grind, continue to build your team. But yeah, again, fundraising is one of those things where we can talk forever about.
Yeah, and you also mentioned that from when you received your first grant, first investment, $10,000 to the next one was about 3 years.
Yep.
So it speaks to just the length of time and the amount of investment you have to put in to when you get money. Any other question? Josh?
Hi, thank you for the session. I had a question. I think you talked about poor financial management as one of the factors that led to closing the other two companies. Was the reason for closing those two only financial? And then also, if they were working out and FundiBots wasn't, would you have pitched the other two and dropped this one?
That's an interesting question. So when I say financial management, I think the statement that I want to say is that business is one very simple equation. Do not spend more money than you're earning, right? That everything that you do in business boils down to that thing. Money in has to be less than money out. It's as simple as that. So the problem with those companies is that that equation wasn't balanced. So we would have a lot of costs, but not enough revenue coming in. Or even if the revenue was a lot, the collection period was taking too long. So one of our clients were advertising agencies, and those guys can keep your money for like 6-9 months, and so you have a cash flow problem, right? So that was the main problem, the sales. So it wasn't like we were mismanaging money, but it was just that the money coming in wasn't matching the cost. So at some point I should have like laid off people, probably gone back to smaller offices, reduce some of our expenses, shared an office with someone. Like there are many things I could have done, but you know, in the moment you're like, yeah, let's keep trying, let's try and make it work. And so as long as that equation is unbalanced, you're going to struggle. It's nice if it's unbalanced from the other side, where you have a lot more money than you're spending. That's a perfect equation. So that's what I meant. And so what is the second half of your question?
If they had worked out,
yeah,
and probably at that point FundiBots wasn't, would you have put the other thing?
Because of how stubborn I am with my delusions, if they had worked out, all three would probably still be in existence. But at that moment, I made a decision to just close. I could have tried to figure out, get a loan, look for investors, etc. But I think I was just tired of fighting. And I felt like I was stretching myself thin, and I had an obligation to the new people that I was promising something amazing, and I had an obligation to that child that had this dream from way back. So of course I chose FundiBots, but also financially speaking, the other organizations were not doing well, and FundiBots was actually doing much better. So there were emotional decisions that I made, there were pragmatic decisions that I made. I would like to, especially the film production, because I'm an artist as well, I would like to bring that back, but I'm not going to jeopardize anything to bring it back.
Yeah. There was one more question by the gentleman, but I'm going to keep it. You're going to be the first one. We give the mic the next time. Solomon, do you want to drink some water?
Yes, thank you.
Or are you on
I'm not a
founder
robot.
mode now? You're even on a budget with water. It's possible. We'll do a few quick fire questions. I want you to answer these questions as quickly as possible. So I'll ask them as quickly as possible. Okay?
I am ready.
You're ready. Best piece of advice you've ever received?
The Gambler, Kenny Rogers. How many of you know that song? Okay. You have to know when to hold on, when to let go. You need to know when things are tight, when to run. Listen to it. It's a country song, but it has a lot of wisdom.
One thing about building FundiBots you wish more people knew?
FundiBots is not as well known as it should be in terms of publicity, and that's because it's a reflection of my own personal introversion. So we are a very large team, a very large organization. We work with tens of thousands of students, but we don't talk a lot. And I'm glad that my comms person is here, so she knows what to do. We need FundiBots to be louder than it is at the moment.
If you weren't building FundiBots, what would you be doing?
Right now, because of how tired I am, I would be somewhere in Japan trying to sleep. But if I were to leave FundiBots, I'm probably going to finance and philanthropy.
Most memorable student or teacher story you carry with you?
The teacher who told me that what I was interested in wasn't relevant, and then my English teacher, because I used to make her happy with the creative composition stories that I used to write.
You're still annoyed with the other teachers?
They are the reason FundiBots exists.
Still holding on. Dream dinner guest, alive or dead?
My dad. He passed away in 2008, and I would love to have a conversation with a father.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's speak about your dad.
Oh my God! Why?
Not too much.
It was a rapid fire answer.
Did he have any influence towards building FundiBots or what you became? what big of a role did he play, and do you think that parents have a very pivotal role to shape the future of their kids, or could their kids just like fly solo and discover themselves?
Absolutely not. Every single parent is 100% responsible for how their kid turns out. Unfortunately, we have a lot of remote parenting right now, where parents leave the upbringing of their children to maids, teachers, etc., and then they wonder what went wrong. So I firmly believe that every parent is responsible for how their child turns out. My dad is extremely responsible for how I am today, both negatively and positively. He taught me how to work hard. That man was a tough father. So he taught me how to work hard. He was very no-nonsense. He did not tolerate unseriousness. We used to run a family restaurant. It's what put us through school. And I watched my dad and my stepmom essentially hustle from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. just to keep that restaurant going. Of course, as a teenager, the lessons didn't make sense to me back then, but now they do, and I appreciate them. He is also responsible for the rebel that I became. So I dropped out of school. I dropped out of my first semester in university, so I like to say that everyone that I'm speaking to is more qualified than I am. I dropped out of school, and because my dad was such an academician, we fell out after I dropped out of school. So that's why I would love to have dinner with him, because I was like, okay, so am I okay? Are you happy now? You know?
Yeah. Interesting. Before we proceed to the next section, I just wanted to ask you something I picked up from the rapid fire question. You said you're an introvert, and you wish that more people knew about what FundiBots was doing, right? Do you think that this cuts across many founders? Does the company or the startup, is a company or startup at one point become a reflection of who the founder is? Do you think those two are...
Yes, absolutely. The founder is responsible for setting culture. So if an organization has a culture of excellence, an organization has a culture of laziness, or an organization has a culture of whatever it is, negative or positive, it's very likely that there's something in the way the founder does things, behaves, etc., that trickles down to the rest of the team. Actually, there's a team member who left us last year, and I kept telling her that part of the reason why I value you here is because you bring energy and vibe and extroversion to the organization. She was a happy person that would lift the entire organization. Like, it was always dancing, celebrating, etc. And I feel that we've sort of lost that touch, and so I need to find a way to bring that back. But the important thing is for founders to be very, very aware of their blind spots, because many of us do things, and because we are authoritarian, we believe that things should be done my way or nothing else. But if you do that, then you risk the organization being the mirror of who you are, weaknesses, strengths, and flaws. So every founder is responsible for how the culture of the organization turns out. And if you're introverted like me, then you need to find ways to ensure that the rest of the organization can thrive outside of your introversion. If you're extroverted, you can end up with companies that are full of hot air. Like WeWork, for example. The founder was noisy, and he built a crazy company, but there were no serious fundamentals beneath it. And I think that the culture was reflective of that. Uber is another example where the toxicity of the founder almost led to the downfall of the organization, because he was the kind of guy that kept cutting rules, breaking rules, etc. And so his engineers were also now beginning to create tools that were bypassing, for example, police monitoring, legal issues, etc. And so, yeah, founders are 100% responsible for their organization's turnout. So if you can't get a co-founder, it's good, because you can sort of balance each other out. but you need to be extremely aware of what your personality is like and how that will affect the growth of your organization.
I completely understand, but I can relate to that. Any you mentioned that something about co-founder. You've not had a co-founder for the last 14 years.
Yep.
Is it that you feel you cannot work with one? Is it a matter of not finding one? Because I think if you read most of the books out there now on startups and building businesses, I mean, even when you're looking for investment, they prefer someone who has a co-founder.
Yeah.
Is there a particular reason you've not found a co-founder? Do you not need one?
I constantly wish I had a co-founder. The work is heavy. The weight on my shoulders is really heavy, and it would be nice to have someone share that with. I did have a co-founder. I think, again, some people were here, were in nursery school. 2003 was my first organization. I had a co-founder. It was a design company, and it lasted about 2 years. And the reason why it collapsed is part of the reason I never got a co-founder again. So he was a great guy, still one of my closest friends. I was the best man at his wedding. But at that time, our work ethic was not aligned. And I'm a very hard worker. I work really, really hard. Except lately because I'm burnt out. So now I'm just trying to survive. But at that time, there was just a huge disconnect between the amount of work. Like, he wasn't pulling his weight. I was doing a lot of the work. To the extent he was supposed to be bringing in the sales and the business. I was supposed to be doing the technical stuff. But we were not getting any new business. He was not coming to office on time, and it just felt really frustrating. And so that was PTSD for me. So to this day, my question around co-founders is, can I find someone who matches my work ethic, who matches my values, and who's able to keep up with, the craziness that I like to move at. But if I was to start something new, I would probably look for a co-founder just to make sure that it's balanced out.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you step back and you look at your younger self, I'll let you determine the age of your younger self. What would you tell him right now?
The first thing I would say is finish school. I know that people like to worship people dropped out of school and have some semblance of success. Trust me, the odds are stacked heavily against you when you drop out of school. It doesn't matter what course that you're doing. Education, especially uni, it's mostly a test of your ability to actually think academically, think through difficult problems, and so then the paper itself is a key that opens many doors. So for me, right now, there are many doors that are closed because the first key that they need is an academic qualification. So I would say go back to school. I would say take care of your health. Because of my extreme workaholism, I am having health issues that would not have been a problem, like lack of sleep. Because I think I've been working for like 18, 20 hours a day for the last 30 years. Sorry, it's not 30. The last 20 something years of my life. And so that's beginning now to affect me. So I'd say take care of your health. I would also say that invest as much as possible. I like telling people that the magic bullet for success is compound interest. Compound interest only works if you start early. So if you're 20 and you can put aside like a 10K every month, start with that 10K. By the time you're my age, you will have a bit of money, because hopefully you'd also have, you won't just be putting in 10K for the next 20 years of your life, right? It will keep increasing, but investing early, investing consistently is actually a game changer if you start it early enough. And then lastly, I would say don't grow too fast, because one of the reasons my old companies failed was because I got excited by potential rather than reality. Yeah.
Okay, that's very key advice. Speaking of advice, there are lots of people in the room who potentially have ideas, who are just starting out on new ideas, or even thinking of pivoting. And we'll go back to pivoting. I have a question there.
Sure.
But who are thinking about pivoting, but are too scared to take that leap. they're not as delulu as you used to be. What advice, what guidance could you give them in terms of like how could they start like right now?
The biggest thing that you need to overcome is that inertia. I am a firm believer that once you start moving, you'll find a way to keep moving. A lot of people get paralyzed by the uncertainty, they're like, but what if? If you're a warrior, if you are someone who's constantly looking at the negative side of things, you'll never get started. And even if you do, you'll constantly be looking for the problems. So my advice basically is start, right? Figure out the next step that you need to do to move your thing forward. It can be, what do I need to do tomorrow to push this thing forward? And it can be just the one step and then you rest. But the more you keep pushing yourself, and I know it sounds like generic advice, but it is the reality. There will never be a perfect time. You will never have enough money. Even if you're a $10 million organization, you'll still be struggling. We know of all these organizations that have budgets of $100 million, but they're still trying to raise money. So you'll never have enough money. So my advice is just start. And I want to tell a small story. During the pandemic, I started a YouTube channel. I don't know what I was thinking, but I started a YouTube channel.
Someone said they saw it.
Oh my God. I started a YouTube channel and I shared a project that I did in 2005. It was called Pathfinder. The goal essentially was to map the whole of Uganda and use it as an interactive visual experience. This was before there was Google Maps and all those things. And when I looked back, I was like, I wish I had the money, I wish I had the resources to put this to life, because maybe I could have sold it to Google and I'd probably be in Japan sleeping right now, right? But the thing was, the lesson that I was sharing that video was just start and keep going, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what the breaking point is. And it could be 1 year, it could be 1 day, it could be 10 years. But normally there is a certain amount of effort that needs to happen before you reach a breaking point. A friend of it, well, it wasn't a friend at the time, but someone watched that video and he found my number and he called me and he said, I've watched this video. There's something I've been struggling with. I need your advice. And I told him, he had a product he had been sitting on. He had been trying to refine it. It was a web app, etc. He had been trying to refine it. And I hope he doesn't crucify me for sharing his story. He was trying to refine it, but he was so uncertain about next steps, etc. How do I move to the next thing? How do I manage this, etc. And he said, what should I do? And I told him, build it, launch it. It doesn't matter how half-baked it is. Just do what the minimum viable product looks like and launch it. And today he's actually doing pretty well, and that app is called Tuvayo, right? And so my advice is, it's easy to look at the negative side. We are wired to be negative, and we are wired to worry and get concerned and all these things. But once you get started on a path, that momentum will keep pushing you forward. And once you can overcome that inertia, just keep going. It's going to be difficult. I don't like to lie to people. Entrepreneurship is hard, but as long as you're consistent and diligent, you will eventually make it.
It's interesting that you mentioned that just start with whatever you have. There's during our training, StartHub. During our training, some of our trainings at StartHub, there's something we have called a 50K challenge. We typically tell our trainees that, do you know you can start a business with 50K? And usually the answer is no, it's not possible. People want money in millions. Yeah. But I think the first iteration we ran with it, we ended up having a team actually making money from 50K. Yeah. Challenge them to go out and figure out what to do with the 50K they had. So it's interesting that you say that, and I think it's not just theory. It's not theory. It's actually practical, and there are many cases where that has happened. Yeah.
If I share the story of how some of my businesses started, I would probably end up on Twitter about being a motivational speaker who says they started a farm with 2 eggs, So I won't say that.
Did you start a farm with 2 eggs?
No, I didn't start a farm with 2 eggs, but basically 0. It is incredible. I feel like it's actually easier to start from zero. I think it's easier to start from zero, yes. Because you put yourself in a very deep problem-solving mode that nothing becomes impossible. But when you start with 1 milli, 10 millis, that's going to be your baseline. As long as you don't have 10 million shillings, you're going to be like, I can't start a business, I can't do anything. But when you have nothing, and you're like, you know what? Let me figure out how to make 10K today. That experience is going to lead you eventually to build $1 million organization. That is my perspective, and that is my belief. I believe that struggle,
problem-solving mode.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pivoting. Has FundiBots pivoted even within like its business model? By pivoting, we mean change the entire business model or part of it or the product. What do you think about pivoting? When is the right time to do a pivot?
I think that if you have the bandwidth for it, you should be constantly looking at pivots, not necessarily to actually pivot, but like to understand what options are available to you. There's an exercise that I like doing called a pre-mortem. So a post-mortem normally happens after something has happened. Someone has died, they're finding out the cause of death, etc. So a post-mortem for an organization would be, it collapses, closes, goes bankrupt, etc. Then you're like, what happened, etc. So a pre-mortem is you creating a scenario where the organization has collapsed, gone bankrupt, etc. And then you say, what led to this? And if you do that as a team exercise, it's a very difficult exercise because it forces people to confront the reality of failure. But if you do it well, you actually begin putting in place solutions for any challenges that might come. The one that people don't like to talk about is what happens if the founder dies? Like if something happens to me, what happens to FundiBots? If I don't have systems in place, it's going to close immediately. But if the systems are strong, it will keep going for some time until the board finds a new person. So I like to always explore options. So pivoting is something that's constantly at the top of my mind. Actually, right now we're in the middle of a soft pivot because of the fundraising issues and Trump. We're now saying, okay, we need to be more serious about sustainability, and so we are trying to figure out how to convert one of our paid products into a serious business that stands on its own. So we are constantly trying to pivot. But in terms of mission alignment, we haven't had a lot of mission drift. So we are still facing our North Star. It's just that we've had a lot of bumps and knocks along the way. But I think that every organization needs to be very open to pivoting because you never know where your success is going to come from. And a lot of the successful organizations that we admire right now actually pivoted a lot before they actually achieved the success. So don't be afraid of pivoting as long as it makes sense from a business perspective, as long as it makes sense from a financial perspective. The way some people do it is they'll have a small team experiment with a small product or a small feature. And if that becomes successful, then that can eventually become the main organization thing. And that's what's happening to us. The experiment we did in schools and classrooms is so successful because it's so successful because students are performing really well after going through that program. And most of our funders now want to fund that thing, and the robotics program is no longer as exciting. So we're trying to figure out what happens to the spirit of the organization if robotics is no longer a huge priority for funders. So we need to figure out how to make that happen. So pivoting is normal, and I'm openly sharing this with you because that's what business is. There are things that you will go through and you will suffer in silence, but as long as you know that it is a necessary part of your journey, then you go through it, and hopefully you come out of the other end alive.
Yeah.
No guarantees.
No guarantees. And this speaks basically to, I think, something that you've mentioned, that because now you're in a position to pivot because you've been constantly iterating on a number of things. That's the only way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're not also reinventing within FundiBots, it would be very hard to find areas within which you pivot.
I think it's also important to, again, I like to encourage funders to be deeply introspective. Many of us are afraid of looking in the mirror because we don't like what we see. both physically and metaphorically. But basically, we are afraid of the reality of our existence and the reality of the organization that you're building. So there are times when the organization, you know, when I'm journaling at night, I'm like, what if this happens? How do I navigate this? So I have all these scenarios planned out. I have all these things mapped out. You need to be, and if I'd been paying more attention, I would have seen the signs earlier and adapted better. But because this thing was working so well, I was fixated on it. And there was a whole bunch of other stuff. But essentially, I wasn't paying enough attention to the risk that was coming. And if I'd paid enough attention, I would have been able to see it earlier. So I encourage founders to be in a constant state of what if, what else, you know, like constantly tweaking. Don't latch onto the thing that's working because it's the only one that you have. There's always lots of opportunity. And I think a good example is Microsoft. I think their biggest product, Microsoft and Amazon, their biggest products are now their cloud offerings.
Exactly.
Yeah. They used to provide hardware, software, etc. And now the small experiment that they both began with is now the biggest revenue stream for them. So big organizations are good at that. That's why you'll see Google launching many products and then killing many products because they're constantly testing what else can we make, where else can we generate revenue from. So those guys experiment a lot. Unfortunately, it's almost always at the cost of employees and personnel and people.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully you can find your middle ground between your ethical behavior and your desire to make a lot of money.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have one last question. I think this one is a bit deep because it's defined very differently from by many people. So I'll just maybe first of all put a plug for StartHub Africa, and then you'll put a plug for FundiBots.
Sure.
When they have context, then we shall define success.
Sounds good.
So StartHub Africa, by show of hands, how many have heard of StartHub Africa before coming here? Okay, that's a good number. So StartHub Africa has basically a number of things that it does. It has a consulting arm, SHA. At the same time, it also has an NGO, which is StartHub Africa. We basically do about four things at the core. The consulting arm runs projects, and it's a for-profit organization that we then put into StartHub Africa, which is the NGO part of the business. At StartHub Africa, we do primarily three things. We have a tech catalyzer program that supports early stage entrepreneurs and founders to build scalable businesses. We're very selective in the numbers that we take in, but we're open to hearing your ideas, and of course we'll take you through a very rigorous test and ask you some very deep, annoying questions that will make you wonder if the business will work or not, but it's also for your own good. We also have a manufacturing track where we support businesses within the manufacturing sector, but we also do our own distribution of different products. And recently we also launched a financial services arm that basically helps founders to run their books a bit better. Solomon mentioned that one of the biggest issues is around managing your finances as a startup. Initially, when you're starting, you tend to run things very ad hocly, but there reaches a time when you need to now become a bit more streamlined, because also founders will not like you if you don't have proper books of accounts. So we have financial services to do that. So yeah, feel free to come through even after here to ask more questions about what we do. FundiBots. Does it do anything outside robotics?
Yes, but 99% of our audience is not in this room. We work with kids mostly in primary school and secondary school. However, if you're a university student that is doing a science subject and you're looking for internship opportunities, we offer really, really strong internship training for 2 months. That is, I think it's open now. I think applications are open. Please do not come if you're not serious, because you will suffer.
How do you define serious?
So It's actually interesting. We normally get a lot of people that quit like within 1 or 2 weeks. So it's mostly around hardware. So we do electronics, programming, mechanical systems, etc. And for many of the students, the 2 months that they spend in that internship training, they get more practical experience in all of those things than in 3 years of campus. And they've told us this themselves, right? So it's intense, it's rigorous, but it's also nice and fun because you get to build projects, you get to do all sorts of things. And then if you're a parent, we have our holiday classes starting next week. So please bring your babies, 6 and above.
We shall bring the babies. Success is, I think, one thing that is a bit of a misnomer to a lot of people. A lot of people define it in terms of monetary. The more money you have, you think the more successful you will be. Some in terms of social capital, the more friends you have, the more successful you will be, or you perceive yourself to be. Do you look at success? I think I need you to talk about success in 2 different ways. So one, success on a personal level, and then success for the business. How do you define those 2 things? Those success for those 2 entities.
Success for the business is if it achieves its mission, which is essentially reach and improve learning for as many children as possible. However, on a more personal level, for me, as long as we change the life of even one person, that is success for me, because I believe in the butterfly effect, meaning that one person's life can transform hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives if you put them on the right path. So for me, success is, have we done the best that we can do today, and can we repeat it tomorrow? So it's not about some abstract, even that $1 million, sorry, I'm looking for money. So
looking for money, and you're speaking in millions.
Yes. So even that, $1 million student target for me is still low, because there are so many kids across Africa that we want to reach. But even if it all ended today, we've reached 60,000 students, and for me that is a large, critical, important mass of students that have been impacted. On a personal, so success for me it's about people. So even on a personal level, I'm not really attracted to material things. Actually, 2 of my board members keep complaining about my salary. They keep complaining about, why don't you have a car? It's dangerous. Blah, blah, blah. And for me, those things are not critical for me. What's critical for me is having enough money to help people. So that's why I want to go into finance and philanthropy. So success on a personal level would be, how have I personally changed the world, whether it's the people around me, whether it's my family, whether it's my community, my village back at home, or whether it's Africa as a whole. So it's abstract, but for me it's like, how has the world been made better because I existed?
I think you're used to setting big things, eh?
Yes.
You want to be light. I'd like to open up the floor to some more Q&A. We'll start with the gentleman right there, and then, do you want to take them at once, or should we do 3 and then we first take them at once, or do you want to do one by one?
One by one would be good.
One by one.
Yeah.
He's right there.
Thank you so much. At the beginning, Solomon, you spoke of that you're here to talk about the failures, right?
About the what?
Failures.
Failures, yes.
As you progressed, you spoke of that right now is like your hardest moment in your business, financially. So I was wondering, you're a non-profit organization. If you're facing challenges financially, why don't you switch and start making profit? Because looking at FundiBots, what you do, I mean, parents would pay millions of money for that, and even other investors would want to buy into it to make money. So is it something that you thought of, or is it even possible to shift from where you are to start making profit? Have you thought along these lines?
Yes, many times. The reason we're a non-profit organization is because the audience, the people that we're trying to reach cannot afford our services. So our primary audience is kids in rural schools, those underserved communities, etc. If we were to attach a cost to the work that we do, we would not reach that critical mass. And my belief is that the challenge that Africa faces is that we are not giving enough opportunity to people who deserve it. So we focus a lot on urban areas, parents who can give their kids tablets and all those things. But there are brilliant kids in the villages who are doing incredible things, but they don't have a good education system. So that's number one, that's the focus. But we do have a paid program, and that program has been earning money. And so now, in light of what we are doing, we want to expand that a little bit more and see how much more we can. I am sure that, given enough time, maybe in 2, 3, 4 years, it will probably be a significantly successful business, and so we want to explore that. But the important thing is that there is a group of people we are trying to reach, and the minute we charge them a fee, we are not going to reach them.
Yes, my name once again is Yakub. I'm a doctor, health entrepreneur. First, I would like to appreciate the way you speak and your advice. It's
Thank
very
you.
amazing. My question to you is, how do you hire, train, and manage the managers of your? Now, the more you scale, you have different offices. So, what is your day-to-day when it comes to that management?
How do I say this? Because I see some of my managers in the room. I've always believed in one saying, which has guided me since my first business. Hire good people, give them the best tools that you can, and get out of their way. So for me, it's always been, as long as I have utmost confidence that you can do your work, I will leave you alone to do your work. So we have 4 regional offices. We have 4 regional offices. We have a headquarters in Kampala, an office in Barara, Gulu, Mbale. And those offices pretty much run themselves. And that's because the foundational part was, are you getting the right people to lead the teams? And sometimes it's hard. You like, even me, like I said, I have no formal qualifications in anything. So everything that I'm talking about, I've taught myself, right? And so even management, business development, etc. And so I encourage our managers to, one, lead from empathy, because I really believe in kindness for people and employees and all that. So I always encourage them to lead from empathy. It's very difficult because humans are humans. But then I also encourage the team to do a lot of self-development. I love to coach. I love to teach people. I love to share the knowledge that I have. And so the managers that I work closely with benefit from that. But one of the things that I also like to do is ensure that for what we can afford, we hire the best person that we can get. So like right now, there's a role that I need to fill, but it's very expensive. We can't afford it. But for that specific role, to hire someone who's less competent would be a disaster. So I'd rather wait until we have the right person, or find the right person who can accept what we offer. But at every level of your business, whether you're able to pay $100K per month or $10,000 per month, find the right person that matches all the values that you live. And value alignment is actually really important. I believe that your managers should have similar values to you as a founder. If you're greedy and capitalistic, find the right people, right? Find the guys who will pull out a whip and, so that they match your energy. But please don't. But if that's who you are, that's fine. But if you're someone who likes to lead with people in mind and build strong cultures, then you find the right people. Finding them is hard, especially when you don't have the money to pay them. And so many young organizations, and even we did that, you start off with part-time people, you start off with volunteers, you start off with low-paying staff. But if you do not constantly nurture and mentor them, and you don't have to do it yourself, there are so many tools and opportunities. I mean, I'm sure even StartHub has some mentorship opportunities. As long as you invest in the growth of your people, they will eventually become good managers. The flip side to that is you need to be very mindful about how you promote people, because we've been burnt before. You promote someone too quickly, or you give someone too much authority, and then the power complex comes up, or they are not competent enough. There's something called the Peter principle, which basically means that everyone is promoted until their level of incompetence. So no matter how good you are, there's a level beyond which you are there's a level at which you become incompetent, right? So the danger is now promoting that person beyond that level without actually helping them build capacity, skills, etc. So it's hard, especially when you're beginning, because you don't have the money, the resources, the time. You're constantly panicking. But as much as possible, invest heavily in mentorship and coaching for people, and guide them to be the best that you can. My last response to that, there's a story, an apocryphal story, where the CEO of a company says, "Oh, we need to train our managers. You know, they are not doing well. We need to change things." And then I think it was the HR who says, "But what if we train them and they leave?" Right? It's a real problem. And then the CEO says, "What if we don't train them and they stay?" Right? So you constantly need to be improving your people, because the person who starts by cleaning the room today could potentially become the next CEO of the organization. And there are stories like that. But are you recognizing that? And you have to be very deeply aware of how you think as a founder. And something I've been telling my team recently is that I have a proximity bias. So basically, I know very well that I am more attuned to the people that I work directly with, and yet I know the organization has so much potential within the different team members at all levels. And so just even today, I told my HR that, you know what, I need you to help me identify high potential people that I might not be paying attention to, and let's figure out a way to nurture them. So you have to be extremely intentional in hiring the right people, but ensuring that you give them the resources. You don't micromanage them, because micromanaging means that that person will never exceed beyond, because the reason most people micromanage is because they're afraid of that person becoming better than them. But if you're an executive director and you want to work with mediocre people, so hire people, give them the tools that they need, nurture them well, whether internally or externally. Some will stay, some will leave, but the important thing is that overall it's a net positive for your organization.
Thank you very much, Solomon. I can tell from your story that you grew over time. So I would like to ask, maybe what are some of the legal things or the things that I should take, that someone that is, okay, let me give some context. I'm trying to start a business, but I'm also trying to have it, because I don't want to be like you, I don't want to be burnt out for 10 years. So I'm trying to be able, and I believe I can have it, get money, have time to do hobbies and stuff, take care of my health. So what advice would you give me to be able to, what are those key things? Because I also don't want to do too much. The thing is small. I don't want to be worrying about things I shouldn't be worrying about. But then I also don't want to ignore other things that I should be taking care of at the start, so that I don't want things to come back and bite me in the future. Mm-hmm. So what are those, what's that cheat code you give me so that I can have my health all the time and then also not fall in trouble with the law? So what are those things you would advise me as someone who has had this thing running for long and growing over time? Like, what are those things you point out to me to really take care of, so that, yes, I can be in line with the law, but also not be doing too much, and yes.
You're being very politically correct.
I know. I'm trying to figure out where the real problem is.
Like that minimum requirement, not to get in trouble with the law.
All right. First thing I'll tell you is, and for me, this is just a personal principle. My number one concern, okay, my number two concern, won't go into the number one concern. My number two concern in Uganda is URA, right? I do not mess with URA. If I owe them money, I find it, I pay it. So, legally, highly encourage you. There's tax avoidance and there's tax evasion, right? Tax avoidance, tax evasion. Tax avoidance means that you use the legal tools and resources and advice to not pay certain taxes. So some people have ways, they do allowances, they do but you are slowly closing all those things, right? But they are legal for now. Tax evasion is where the problem is, where you know that you're supposed to pay a certain amount of tax and you don't pay it. So when you talk about the law, that's number one. There are two law things you need to worry yourself about it in Uganda. One is the tax officer, and then the second is the labor office. Labor office is not really a problem until you're a much bigger organization, because they don't really pay attention to small organizations. But as you grow bigger, you need to start paying attention to policy. And that's why many large companies end up having lots of policies, because it's to protect themselves from the law. All right, putting the law aside, hopefully that answers your question, your concern.
So you say labor and tax.
Labor and tax. But there are others, don't
I said cheat code, so I'm not.
Yes, labor and tax. Please get good financial advice. I think StartHub can help with that. Get good financial advice. It's actually really easy. The problem is, the reason why people don't like paying taxes in Uganda is because we know where taxes go. That's the big issue, right? Otherwise, if you were in a highly functional economy where there's great healthcare, great infrastructure, etc., of course people complain, but people will pay their taxes happily because they know that they're getting a government good in return. Uganda, the money I give URA every month pains me, because I know that someone is going to go to Germany, then go and build a church instead of a hospital, right? So on the other side, the reality is you are not going to build a company if you're not willing to give it 100%. Reality number one. Think of it like a baby.
So I have to be burnt out.
No, you don't have to be burnt out. You can manage it. You can manage. A good thing would be to get a co-founder. If you have a co-founder, it's very good for balancing work. It's also very good for mental health, because the stuff that we deal with can get hectic. So if you have a co-founder, you can brainstorm things, find solutions, and especially if it's someone that's different from you, they can look at things from a different perspective, and it also gives you time to rest. Because right now, if anything happens to FundiBots, I am the last person. I am responsible for that. But if there's a co-founder, I'd be like, no, this is finance, this is HR, you handle that, me, I'll handle strategy and fundraising. So the load is balanced. I do encourage you, though, as much as possible, find a way to rest. I don't know how, because I'm not good at resting. So maybe there's someone in the audience who's better than this. Find a way to rest. And I say this with utmost sincerity, because we push ourselves so hard to make this thing work that by the time you realize that your health is in crisis, it's too late. And especially in the early 20s, when your health is optimum. Everyone's health problems begin when they hit 35, 40, etc. Whether you're a founder or not, your health problems start. Your knees start complaining, you begin forgetting things, it happens. But if you are pushing yourself even harder, then those problems are amplified. And things like eating well, exercising, dieting, taking time to rest, all of those are critical. It seems important when you're in hustle mode. When you're in, it doesn't seem important when you're in beast mode. Yeah? Like, I have to hustle, but man, that stuff compounds. So the good things compound, the bad things compound. So take care of your health as much as you can in whatever way you can figure it out. There are people who have actually done it in such a way that they find low effort businesses that they can do on the side, or they can do like polite, but then they have enough discipline to run it efficiently within certain specific hours. The problem with some of us is that you get lazy and then you realize you have to send a report at 1 a.m. And so if you're very disciplined about it, you can make it work. I know it's not exactly a cheat code, but I hope it's helpful.
We'll have one question We'll just have one question from a lady. Derek, why are you shaking your head? Okay, take the mic. Are you a lady?
Yes, it is.
Oh.
Hello, Solomon. My name is Lona. I work at StartHub. My question is around sleep in Japan. You mentioned it more than twice.
Yeah.
So I would like to know, you've had your thing going on for a while, and you also mentioned that you built a team and systems that are maybe taking you away from that founder syndrome. So I'd like to find out why you're actually not doing the sleeping in Japan. At the start of this, you said you're very exhausted, and I know you acknowledge that this is something that is probably a challenge to your health.
Yeah.
Having heard a lot about you, I think you're someone that the next generation would like to draw inspiration from. So
Thank you.
why aren't you taking the Japan sleep? What's stopping you?
Japan
from
is
doing
expensive.
Thank you. Japan is very expensive. But I think that so first of all, I like solving problems. So I think I'm constantly stuck in problem-solving mode. So as long as there is something that I feel is not quite right, I'll keep pushing until I get there. And unfortunately, I keep being stressed by both my board and my team to take time off, to rest, etc. And I need to start listening more. So there is no real reason aside from cost and just the fact that I like the work that I do. But then every once in a while, I was hoping to take a sabbatical this year, but then, with all Trump. But, with all the fundraising issues, it's difficult to step away when the house is about to catch fire, you get. So I need to pay attention to that for a bit. I know that the team can handle it, but it is my responsibility to be there present for this particular moment. So even if I know that I can offload this to the board and whoever, I'm like, no, it's my responsibility, it's my duty to do that. Hopefully I will go to Japan and sleep at some point this year or at the end of the year.
It's interesting why you chose Japan, but it's also
because I'm a geek. I love technology, anime, video games, comic books.
Korea. Why didn't you mention
So it's
Korea?
Japan and South Korea.
South Korea.
Yes.
In 1 minute. I mean, we could go on, and I'm being given eyes from all corners by my bosses. We could go on and on with this conversation. You have a lot to say. In 1 minute, could you just give maybe the audience your last parting shots or cheat code?
That one I was not prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. This is going to be controversial. Not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur. I want to emphasize that. There are people who are fantastic at doing the work that they've been given, delivering it excellently, and they go home to their families, chill with on the weekends, they're on barbecue, rugby club, jadondo, having the time of their life. They come back on Monday, they do a great job, they earn a great salary, but they don't want that drama of sleepless nights. Then there are those who like that chaos. There are those who essentially say, they cannot be employed, they are unemployable. They are always hustling, looking for the next thing. If this thing has jammed, what's the next thing? Those guys, actually it's very hard to hire entrepreneurs because you're like, who is this guy? He's not in office. And he's like, I'm at the farm doing some stuff. So my controversial take is that not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur. You can be wealthy by building a strong, stable career. There are millions of examples of people like that. And entrepreneurship is exceptionally difficult. If you're not cut out for resilience, persistence, problem solving, etc., you're going to struggle. So I don't know who wants to be an entrepreneur, but I hope you're ready for it.
Thank you so much, Solomon. Choose your hustle.
Choose Yeah, choose your hard.
Choose your hand. A round of applause for Solomon. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, for making the time to be here. When you're on a social media sabbatical, you still decided to come and grace us with your presence and give us your few words of wisdom, but to also allow yourself to be vulnerable, to share a lot of what you've shared with us today. I don't think this has been had anywhere, so we're really thankful and grateful that you were able to come through. To the audience, thank you for being amazing, for asking the questions. I know you still have so many questions. Solomon will stay here for a few more minutes during the cocktail session. You could try and sneak in your question. If you're an entrepreneur, you'll figure it out. If you're not, I don't know what you'll do. Sneak in your question and see that it's answered. But also, Solomon, when he gets back online, where are you most active on X?
Twitter.
On Twitter.
It's not, I can never call it X.
You refuse.
I'm too old for that new stuff.
You have to adapt. Are your DMs open?
Yes, but I get overloaded, so I may not respond quickly, but I'll eventually get around to it.
Okay, so
a response on the timeline is probably a faster response.
okay, so either ask on the timeline when there's context, or DM him and wait for a response. Thank you so much. There's going to be a cocktail session right outside. Please go have a bite, right, Mary? Please go have something to eat or drink and also interact. The whole point is to network with each other. So outside, even talking to Solomon, please network and talk to each other as much as possible. Your next co-founder could be here. Yes. Oh yes, and there's a group picture, but we can't all fit.
They'll be in the
Okay, the entrepreneurs should already be here. I don't know why they're still seated. So let's do a group picture with Solomon. If you like to take a picture, please just.
You are it.
You are.
3, 2, 1.